Hello, Fix-It Tony here. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to repair a gate post. So this post right here is very loose. We have some cracked wood. We also have a latch that doesn't have a spring anymore. And we have more damage down here. And you can see how the post no longer works. And it jams into the gate, causing some damage. So in order to keep my dog in the yard, I need to fix this gate, level it off. I have some issues here with my hinge spacing as well. This post here has heaved a little bit over the winter. So this is a multi-step process. We're going to sort of level off the gate, square it off, redo the post. Replace this cracked wood with fresh wood, and then I'm going to fill it with concrete, and I'll show you that step. So stay tuned. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So the first step is to unscrew all the screws that are in here. Over the years, this fence was built 10 years ago, and I had to do a little bit of intermediate repairs. But over the years, it just, the weather and the abuse just sort of wore it out. So first I have to undo all the screws. Let's take a look at what the inside now is, now that I took off this cover. You can see how they have this one piece of cedar attached to this pole. And this whole post is loose inside this hole that they made. So this is fascinating that this is very loose. So I think what's happened is this concrete has heaved and has split open. So that's a problem that I'm going to have to contend with. I'm going to have to think about this as I keep my demolition. I'm going to revisit how I'm going to patch this to stabilize this pole. Interesting. Stay tuned. Well, I did not expect what just happened. I just basically lifted this pole post up and it removed. So I am shocked that the installers never drove the post down into the dirt. They only went into the concrete and they filled it up. That's just horrible workmanship. Oh man, they snuck one past me. So I got a new dilemma. I have to get a new channel. All right, so I came back from the hardware store and they didn't have the U channel. So I just ended up using 2 1/8 or 2 3/8 round galvanized fence post. I'm going to pound it in with my fence post pounder. I did my best to get it approximately plumb in both this direction and this direction. And I wedged a piece of stone to help keep it so that it goes in as straight as possible. I'll be checking every 3 to 4 inches to make sure it's on track. I got an 8-foot piece of fence post, so I'm going to try and drive it down as far as I can, and when it stops, usually it's going to hit either a boulder, a stone, or the edge of my footing. We'll see what happens, but I'll hopefully be able to get deeper than what those other knuckleheads did, and it's just a matter of pounding it in. Testing level. Not bad. I have a stone here at the bottom. And then test this way. And that's pretty good. It doesn't have to be exact because this is going to get wrapped and filled with concrete. But it has to be close. I think I hit a stone or something because I'm not making any more progress after 10 strikes, so I'm going to keep trying. It's about as good as it's going to get. So, but I do have more stability. And then I'm going to fill this up with concrete, fill the pipe with concrete, put concrete around it. I think it'll be much better. So from a level standpoint, let's take a look. For what this is going to be doing, embedded in concrete, that's about as good as it'll ever get. And then this one is spot on. So that's all good news. All right, so I have my 1x8 by 8 foot cedar boards that I purchased. This is a rough cedar because on the one side it needs to be a rough sawn finish to match the rest of my fence. Then the next step is to cut 2 4-foot lengths. I did measure the overall length of this board, and it's actually a 1/4 inch larger than 8 feet. So I split the difference and make it centered, and then when I saw it, it'll be close to 48 inches each. Now the next thing I do in preparing to cut is I'm always checking the square of the factory cut. So I use a speed square and just go by feel, and the factory edge is nice and square. If you go to a good quality lumber yard, you can get really nice quality cedar, and you can see how this is sort of rough sawn. The next step is to mark my 48 inches. It's actually not 48, it's 48 and 1/8, because remember it was a 1/4 inch longer. So I'm going to cut on the center of that line. I will then take my speed square and mark a line, make it a little bit more pronounced. All right. Now, I'm going to take my board over top of the edge of my sawhorse, and you can see how it's not balanced, and that's where clamps come into play. I'm going to clamp this board down to my sawhorse so it's a nice stable piece of wood. So in terms of safety precautions, you always want to make sure that if you're working by yourself, if you don't have a helper, always make sure your workpiece is secured. So you can see how I secured my workspace with a pair of clamps to my piece, and I have this board laying right over the line. So now the next step I'm going to do is set my camera, and what I'm going to do is use the other important thing to do. So whenever you're making adjustments to your power tools, always have them unplugged or the battery out. So what I did was I adjusted the depth of the blade so that just the carbide tips get past the wood. You don't have to have the full depth of the cut. I think the reason is efficiency of the tool use and the blade, and also chipping on the other side. And safety. You don't want to have more blades sticking out than you need to. At least those are my reasons. Then I'll put my battery back in. And now I'm going to use my speed square to guide. So I'm going to set the square over here. I'm going to guide this up against it, and then I'll have a nice square cut. I could take out my miter saw, but it's in a box on a shelf. And by the time I take it down and set it up, all I'm doing is basically 2 cross cuts. So I'm not going to use a miter saw for just two cross cuts. All right, that's that. Quick update. I made a on-the-fly design engineering and design change. I took a piece of pressure-treated wood to the exact inside dimension of my box, of my post cover, and then I cut a hole that is the size of my pipe. Now, I didn't have a hole saw that was exactly 2 3/8. I had a 2 1/2, but I have this bituminous membrane type of wrap for building decks and stuff that I wrapped around the post, and then that help fill the gap, fill up that space, act as a bushing. And the reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to try to secure this post cover around the post to keep it. I wanted to avoid the post and the whole assembly from doing too much torquing and spinning and wobbling back and forth, just in case the cement that I pour in here eventually shrinks or cracks or degrades. I wanted to have an extra little bit of backup. All right, when setting up your table saw, first thing you're going to do is set the blade height. Again, you set the blade height so that it's just above the wood, sort of the height of the carbide tips. Now, what I like to do is I like to take my finished piece, the piece that I want to be my final width, or my thicker piece to be on between the blade and the fence. I generally don't like to have a small piece of wood jammed, if I can, right up against the blade, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to be pushing this board through, and I do have push sticks, but if my piece of wood is going to be 6 inches, I can ride my thumb, my fingers and my hand on this edge and hold the piece and push it all the way through. This piece that's left over, it's going to be loose. It may want to vibrate backwards, so I'll just be mindful that the piece may want to shoot backwards. But as I'm going through, I'll sort of gently move that piece away, push that one through. Okay, so that's that. In terms of setting the width, you have to pay attention to the saw blade. So I don't know if you can see it here, but every tooth, so this tooth is angled away from the fence and this tooth is angled towards the fence. So you always want to make sure that you're measuring the distance from the edge of the tooth that's closest to the fence to get your final width so that you have the most precision. So what should I say? Well, before you start, make sure you have your workpiece right up against the fence, nice and tight, and then you're going to hold it until it engages, and then you're going to just push smoothly in all one motion. All right, so assembly involves taking the wide piece and making it flush to the inside piece. Then I identify the middle of this board, and then you mark a line on both sides. And I pre-drilled using a tapered pilot hole bit like this to get through this part of the wood, because when you put a screw in and it has a stainless steel screw, it's got this sort of smooth shank. There really isn't a lot of biting. The biting is happening with the head. And where splitting often happens is if you don't have a pilot hole and you're drilling through the wood into what you're actually needing to grab is this bottom piece, you can actually end up splitting this. And especially when you're close to the edge, you have a risk of splitting. These screws are special in that they do have a little bit of a groove. Here, let me grab a new one. It's got a little groove there to help with the drilling, to help prevent the splitting, but splitting can still happen. I used clamps to clamp my piece flush, to hold it flush, just so that I know that it's going to be a nice finish. And then I also used my speed square to make sure that the holes, the screws, are lined up across. It's just a small detail. For me, it's a craftsmanship issue. If you just start putting things random, I just don't like how that looks. So I'd rather have it even across, so I know all my pressure is the same and it looks good. So I'm just going to continue putting the screws in. I'm going just flush. There's no point in driving the head deep into the wood. It does not increase the grabbing strength. Keep it flush, keep the damage to this wood to a minimum, and you'll have less problems with corrosion. The other key thing, I've worked with cedar for 30 years now, and always use stainless steel fasteners with cedar. Cedar has an acidic compound in it that will rust and go through galvanized and non-galvanized fasteners. So always use stainless steel, get a good result, and you won't have the sort of black dripping or black lines, which is corrosion or some sort of a stain coming from the fastener running down the wood. That's a sign of poor workmanship and not paying attention to detail. So now, here's how things are shaping up. So we have, you can kind of get a sense of what's happening here. So you have the wide face, and then you have the inserts, and then the cap will go on top, and then we have our 6x6 post. This angle bracket was easy to install. As you can tell, what's going to begin to happen is, especially here, I'm not going to be able to screw the screws in this way. So what I did was I located the brackets. I'll mark these 3 holes. I'll then mount the brackets first to this piece, and then I will fasten the bracket down here. The problem I'm going to have is when I put this cap on, and when I put the cap on, I'm not going to be able to put any screws in on the side here. So it's going to be sort of a loose fit, but still supportive. So that's kind of what I'm going to do there. So I'm actually going to put the other bracket here as well, and then before I put that on, I'll put this bracket here so that the sides will be supported. That's kind of my plan. I'll show you when it's done. You can sort of see that I need to get that in there, right? But it's a little bit narrow. So what I'm going to do is go to that other end. I got that first piece in. Oh, it popped out. Yeah. Let's spread this open. There we go. Go to the other side. Spread it open. Okay, get the camera. All right. Spread this with my thumbs. Push that in. And then it's a little bit loose. Get a hammer and tap it this way. Hammer. And tap it. Come there. Alrighty. I could a little bit of a step. There. Okay. Let me show you how. So this is the bottom. This is the bottom of the post. It's going to have, so the post is going to go through here. I hope I can level it and make it plumb, but I'm taking a chance. But I'm more interested in making sure A, cement just doesn't pour out the bottom. B, I connect the post to the pipe as best I can. I'm leaving the other end open. I'm leaving the other end open so I can pour concrete in. I also did install a membrane on the inside of the wrap post of the cedar post, so that moisture from the concrete doesn't rot the wood from the inside out. So that is that. When mixing concrete, you can certainly read the instructions on how much water to add, but sometimes that's off, and if you believe it, you might get the wrong mix. I want this to be a little bit on the runny side. So you make a little puddle, hole here, and fill it with water. Don't fill it too much, and then a little bit at a time, get it in there. There. This is the consistency I want it. Here, it's got to go down the pipe. So fast forward to the next day, I spent time working on the gate. Pretty straightforward. There were the pieces of cedar boards onto which the hinges attached to, and the latch. Over 10 years in heaving, I had to adjust the gate holes. The cedar started to crack. So basically I just removed it and replaced it with the thicker boards from which I had some leftovers. And I'm installing new hinges. These new hinges are spring-loaded. Same brand as the other hinge, but a little different mechanism for adjustment. And I temporarily fastened the hinges to the gate. Generally followed the idea of trying to keep this spacing. Well, the spacing was driven by the hinges, so So you kind of just have to go with that. I did add an extra board to the side of the gate, and I mounted the latch just temporarily with 2 screws, just so that I could mount my latch. Now remember, this is solid concrete behind this wood. The concrete hasn't hardened completely yet, so it's still a little soft because it's in an enclosed space. So I use these Spax lag screws that can also go into concrete. So the screws go through the wood and into the concrete, which is soft, but then it'll harden, and I think those screws will hold up just fine. And I'll put a couple of smaller ones right here as well. But suffice to say, I don't really need to do that right now. It's holding up really well. I thought I would show you one more video clip of it completely finished, with the caps back on, hinges secured, everything is stained. I tried to stain the match as close as possible with what I had laying around. It'll age and it'll blend in. I don't have any worries about that. And one of the things that always bothered me was that when the original fence installers installed the fence, they didn't make these 3 posts exactly even, so I made those posts level with each other. And one last final check. There. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope this inspires you to take on a fence project of your own. Thank you. Have a great day.